November 18th, and today I have with me a box of goodies that will hopefully help you understand and maybe catch a little more bass during this time of year. I know this time of year can be really tough. The water temperatures drop and the fish's metabolism also drops, which means they're less prone to eat. And there's a couple different tactics and things you can do to force them to eat around this time of year. Anyway, let's hop right into it, and hopefully by the time this video is over, you have a little better understanding of why you are not getting bit and what to do in that case. So we're going to start off with the top water baits and then work ourselves down to whatever you'll be fishing on the bottom of the water this time of year. First bait I have with me here is a little traditional popper. This is something you'll want to throw around, dying weed beds, around grass, suspended grass where the fish still may be hiding. The fish, won't really want a very fast presentation this time of year. Bass don't necessarily want stuff that moves too quick this time of year. Sometimes they do, but a lot of times, when the water temperatures are slowing down, the bass will slow down with it. Fish are a cold-blooded creature. Their temperatures change with the environment that they're surrounded by. The water is very cold, the fish are moving very slow. So the way you want to work this popper is you want to cast it out there, make a precision cast, make sure you're putting it right where you want it to be, around structure, grass, etc., whatever. Anyway, the way you want to fish this is just give it a couple pops, like, say 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, and then let it sit. That is the key. Let it sit. Don't let it move, don't pop it, don't drag it through the water. Just be patient. Let it sit sometimes for up to a minute and a half, This is a very slow time of year for fishing. That's our first bait. Our next topwater bait, of course, this time of year would be a buzz bait. Something that's, going to get enough action in the water where you could possibly get a reaction strike. You fish this once again around anything that's like suspended, over cover, over old grass beds where the fish still may be lying. You can cover a lot of water. Sometimes this year, the bass will want something presented to them a little faster than a popper if they're willing to bite topwater, and this is just a bait to do it. Our next bait to be using this time of year would be any type of crankbait. Anything that could mimic a small dying fish. This one's actually bluegill color. This one dives 8.5 feet. You want to make sure you get down to, those deeper columns of water where the fish are now staying. The fish won't suspend in, the shallows like they did during the summer. Sometimes they will to go up and feed and such, but you want to really make sure you can get down to that deeper level where the fish are going to be. Our next crankbait to be throwing this time of year would be a square bill. Unlike the deep diver, this is the one you would want to be throwing along the edges, along the dying grass, where the bass might be feeding up on the shad or the dying minnows. There's a huge shad and minnow die-off this time of year. When it gets really cold, they just go to the shallows, they try to feed up on the algae, and, the cold just takes them. That's the way of life. Anyway, this crankbait here is something that'll only dive to about like 2.5 to 4 feet. Something you want to be fishing around shallow cover, something you can knock off rocks and wood, something that'll really get a reaction strike out of these fish. Moving right along, not trying to make this too long of a video. I got a few more baits to go over here. Our next, and probably one of my most favorite types of baits to be throwing this time of year, would of course be a deep diving jerk bait. Something that can really get down to the lower water columns, and something that, once you get it down there, it'll just sit. I think this is actually slow sinking, so this will continue to sink as it sits in the water. Something that is perfect for this time of year. A dying fish will either slowly fall or slowly rise. This is a perfect imitation of dying bait fish. The way I fish this is, I just get it down to that level, and then I just let it sit there. Give it a couple twitches, give your rod tip a couple twitches, a couple pops in the water, and then just let it sit there. I'm telling you, in the later months of winter, you can let this sit, you can pause this, dead stick it, whatever you want to call it, for up to 5 minutes. I mean, you can fish this really, really slow. These baits are very versatile. There's a billion different ways you can fish them. That's just the way I like to do it this time of year. Anyway, moving on to our next type of jerkbait here. Next jerkbait we have with us here is a little balsa rapala, slow floating. These are absolute fire. They work all times of the year, all different types of water, creeks, reservoirs, quarries, rivers, etc. They just work. This is actually what you would consider an ultralight jerkbait. It only goes down to about 3 to 6 feet, and it slowly raises, very, very, very slowly. So this is something you'll want to be fishing in, not extremely deep water. Jerkbaits are a clear water bait. You want to make sure you have some clear water to fish these. They don't send off a lot of vibration in the water. They're very subtle, something that won't spook the bass. It's very small presentation, something the bass can just see. This one's eye's a little dinged up, that's my bee. Caught some donkeys on this guy here. Anyway, this is just another great fall bait that you can pick up a couple decent bass on almost any time of year. Moving right along. Next would be skirted baits. With me here, I have a small finesse jig and also a small chatterbait. You want to definitely cut down your trailers when you're using any type of small skirted bait. Especially this time of year, the bass won't want necessarily a big presentation. They'll just want a nice meal that they can just gulp down and then, continue on with their, whatever they do this time of year. Anyway, this is just like a little smaller presentation than I would use during the summer periods when the bass are willing to eat a bigger meal. It's got a nice little skirt on there. I think this is actually a booyah jig. It is green pumpkin color. And then the chatterbait I have here is just like your traditional white shad or whatever. The great thing about these skirted baits is you can throw them almost anywhere. Deep water, shallow water, whatever. It's all about how you fish them. I'll start out with this jig. This is definitely something I would be throwing in the fall. It has a smaller profile, something that a bass will still be willing to eat this time of year. Sometimes the bass don't want to eat a huge meal during winter. They usually filled up pretty well at this point. Actually, it's been cold for a while. Just let it get down to the bottom and then just slowly drag it and pop it along, giving it lots of pauses. Make sure it keeps good bottom contact. You're not fishing it too erratically. You're not spooking the fish, etc. Another great bait. Moving right along, we have our chatterbait here, our next skirted bait. This is another great bait. You can fish in almost any depth of water. Just cast it out there, let it get all the way to the bottom. You can put a trailer hook on here. Some people like to do that. It increases your hookup ratio. Trailer hook, trailer bait, anything really. Some people like to fish it without anything on there at all. I actually always like to fish a trailer. There's another bait you'll just want to cast out there, let it get all the way down to the bottom. And then you want to, actually figure out what the bass want. Do you want to burn it? Most of the time this time of year when it's really cold, you want to just keep a nice, slow, steady retrieve, very slow. You'll feel it moving most of the time with chatterbaits. You'll feel the bait actually working. If you run into some dying out weeds and you get tangled and it stops working, you won't feel the blade on here thumping around anymore. That's a good way to tell if your bait is tangled or not. Anyway, this is another great way to get a reaction strike out of fish this time of year. It's a little more flashy, sends off a lot more vibrations than a jig does. Something that sometimes can just get the bass stirred up. Moving on. Okay, our last category is of course going to be soft plastics. I'm going to start out with your traditional finesse worm. Not as bulky as a Senko, a little more flutter in the water, a lot more finessey, obviously. These usually don't come as heavily salted as Senkos do. It takes them a lot longer to fall in the water. It's something you want to, just keep along the bottom. Fish it very slowly. This color here is obviously black. This is a great color to be fishing all time of year. Sometimes during the winter, the fish will like something a little lighter than black, but this has honestly just been my go-to. We're around here in eastern Pennsylvania or southeastern Pennsylvania, in Pennsylvania. This is a very good color to be using year-round, black. Just a little heads up for y'all. These are very light. It's easy to jump these high off the bottom and actually start swimming them. That is not the idea. We have another bait here for that. This is your soft jerk bait, soft swim bait, fluke, whatever you really want to call it. There's so many names for this. The way you want to fish this time of year is cast it out there. I like to fish this on a Texas rig. You can fish this on a swim jig, Texas rig. There's a billion different other ways you can fish it. I like to just give it a couple twitches, like 2 to 3 twitches, and then let it sit. And then just wait for a bite. Give it a couple more pops after, like, say, a minute or so, and then just keep working it. Work it all the way back to the shore. This is just a real great bait to fish this time of year, very versatile. And there you have it, people. These are the baits that I would be throwing this time of year if you are still looking to catch largemouth bass. It's really tough and it's hard to catch bass this time of year. You really need to pull out every trick in the book you have. So next time you go out fishing for some bass and it's this cold outside, maybe try to bring some of these lures here with you. This has just been an informational video. I don't expect it to, get a ton of views or really do that well. But if you actually like these videos, please let me know in the comments below. I'll be more than happy to do more of them. They're easy. I don't need to catch fish. Anyway, Eastern PA Fishing here. Until next time, tight lines, good luck. You know what it is by now.